Assembly, now representing the 33rd Congressional District of California in the United States Congress, Congresswoman Karen Bass. Congresswoman, nice to see you this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming in. Welcome back to Washington.
Thank you. Glad to be back. A little chilly.
Yeah, it is a little chilly, right. You know, there are high expectations that you guys are going to come back and get together and sit down and solve this problem and avoid save us from going off the fiscal cliff,
right.
Which, of course, requires both sides to be willing to compromise. Do you think Republicans are ready to?
I think that we've seen some shifts. I think that they've been sending certain signals out that they're willing to change. And first and foremost, they're beginning to question the power of Grover Norquist. Finally, maybe his house of cards will come tumbling down.
Are they really, though? Because when I listen to them, right, they say, yeah, we accept that we need new revenue, right? But we're not going to raise those taxes. We're not going to let those Bush tax cuts expire. We're not going to let rates go up on the wealthiest of Americans. So aren't they trying to have it both ways?
Well, I think they are, but the fact that they've vocalized the word revenue for the first time, and they also are not qualifying it by saying that it has to be revenue neutral, there has to be an equal amount of cuts. You know, so I do see a shift in their tone, a shift in their language, and then you have heard a few members saying they're not going to sign the pledge. You've heard a few senators saying they're not going to abide by the pledge, and you just didn't hear that before.
No.
And so I think there are signals that are out there that they're going to change, and I actually have come back quite optimistic.
Well, that's good to hear. Now, because there's so much pessimism reigning in Washington these days, we're both from California, and is it possible here that California is sending a lesson maybe, or a message to these Republicans in Congress? They really blocked any progress in California. The Republicans did for a long time.
Right.
And look what happened. The American people turned on them, and you can explain better than I what the situation is in Sacramento today for the California Republican Party.
Well, I'm so excited for my state, for our state, and also for the state legislature, because they have tools now that we just didn't have a few years ago. And the reason they have those tools is because the voters voted to, one, give the legislature majority vote for a budget. So California is no longer one of 3 states. There's now the supermajority. So in both houses, there's 2/3 are controlled by Democrats. Californians voted for taxes. Californians voted for the same thing the president is proposing, which is going back to the tax rates for those who earn $250,000 and above. And so with those tools alone, California has the possibility of raising revenue. You know, in the time that I was there, our budget was $110 billion. By the time I left, it was $83 billion. So the cuts to schools in particular have been absolutely devastating. And finally, Californians have taken a chance and are going to reverse that.
And California voters said, yeah, we're willing to raise taxes on the wealthiest, right? And they also said, and if those Republicans are just being obstructionists, is standing in the way, you know, we're going to get them out of the way and put Democrats in who are going to get something done. So you are hopeful that things can come together. The president today, the White House announced yesterday, the president is going to go on the road. He's going up to Pennsylvania to a toy factory, small business, on Friday. He's going to be making trips around the country to build support for this tax cut for 98% of Americans. And Republicans now are saying, no, he ought to stay here in Washington and meet with us.
Yes.
The president doing the right thing?
I think he is doing absolutely the right thing. He's going back to the American people. That's absolutely where he needs to go. He's already been very clear. The bill that needs to be on his desk has already passed out of the Senate. It is in the House. All we have to do is pass the bill. But I'll give you another indication as to why I think things have changed. One Republican, I believe Representative Cole, is saying, why don't we just go ahead and do the Senate bill? That's unheard of. He's saying, go ahead and just let the tax cuts expire on the, top 1% and pass the bill right away. And so you just didn't hear those statements 6 months ago.
No, Tom Cole is one of the most powerful members of the Republican leadership. Who
yes.
Said he told them in their caucus, you guys are making a mistake. that as a party we should pass that this bill that already passed the Senate,
exactly,
which would give that tax break to. Actually, we keep saying, I do too, by the way, I don't mean to be critical, that to 98% of Americans. But it's really a tax break for 100% of Americans because everybody gets a tax break on the first $250,000 of their income. By the way, on this, on the Republicans and the chairmen, Peter, we were talking about the story about the committee chairs the other day. I'd love to get your comment on this.
Great story, and I'm going to lift liberally from a story that was done by John Stanton, our friend from BuzzFeed, because he points out a couple of facts here. Republicans seem to be acting like it's 1912, not 2012. Yesterday, they appointed their 19 chairs of their committees, all of them men. All of them were men. And not only that, by the way, Republicans also pushed a border security bill through yesterday. So all this talk about problems that Republicans have with demographics, with the Hispanic community and women, they seem to throw that all aside.
I'd have to add 19 white men.
That's true.
They're the only people they could find as chairs for their committees. It says something about the difference between the two parties, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And, all you have to do is watch C-SPAN and look at the floor of the House, and you can see the lack of diversity on one side and the other half of the room that looks like the United States. I think that it was even sad within their leadership. They fought, a woman, Kathleen Rogers, who was running for a leadership position, and she had opposition. Now, she ultimately won. So if they weren't careful, they were going to have their leadership as all male as well.
All male as well, right. Back to the fiscal cliff for a second, because we talked about their unwillingness still to entertain letting the tax with the Bush tax cuts expire. They also say, yeah, we're okay for new revenue as long as Democrats are willing to accept entitlement reform. What do they mean when they say entitlement reform, Congresswoman?
And see, I do think that there's certainly room to make changes in entitlement, but I think what they're talking about is essentially breaking the guarantee that our country has had for decades with seniors. And in terms of fundamentally changing Medicare, I don't know. Let's see if they resurface Paul Ryan's voucher proposal. Let's see if they resurface the bill that Paul Ryan proposed right after Bush was reelected. Bush 43 was reelected, when he went on a tour around privatizing Social Security, and Paul Ryan was the first one to author that legislation. So let's see what they mean. And I know Democrats will never stand for breaking the guarantee.
That, in fact, is what they mean by entitlement reform. Senator Dick Durbin was over at the Center for American Progress yesterday, and he made it very, very clear that when the word entitlement reform is used, or the phrase, there's one thing it should not include. Here's Senator Durbin.
I think we should take Social Security off the table for the current fiscal cliff and deficit discussion, but be very honest about what we're going to achieve in the near term. I think we should create the equivalent of a Simpson-Bowles Commission for Social Security and give them 8 months to a year, a directive, to come up with a plan to buy 75 years of solvency for Social Security.
But Social Security is really a different issue, isn't it?
Exactly. Absolutely it is. And I would agree with Senator Durbin, absolutely. But I'll give you a reform in Medicare that I think Democrats would support, and that is looking at prescription drugs and making it more competitive.
Amen.
You know, or really cracking down on the fraud that takes place through the medical devices. That is not what individuals cheating Medicare. There are fictitious businesses that are set up that rob Medicare of billions of dollars every year. So it's not as though changes to entitlement programs are completely off the table. It's the structural breaking of the guarantee that should be off the table.
And isn't it interesting that when President Obama did identify $716 billion
right.
in fraudulent billing on the part of insurance companies and cut that out, that they accused him of cutting benefits in Medicare?
Well, because what benefits were they concerned about? The benefits to big businesses.
Big businesses, exactly. Congresswoman Karen Bass in studio with us. And we will welcome your calls and your comments at 866-55-PRESS. The Full Court Press continues just a minute.
Heard around the country and seen on current TV, this is the Bill Press Show.